Hi everyone, really pleased to have you join us at We the Women Asia Global Digital Town Hall. The panel is curated by Confederation of Indian Industries, Indian Women Network, and the topic is going to be on the non-linear career trajectory that women are forced to adopt. Hi Amanda, hi Nick, hi Subbalakshmi, hi Vaishali. Thank you so much for joining. Lovely to see you. We are going to be talking about the nonlinear career trajectories that women are going to be having to adopt in the workplace. They're falling off the workplace because of the three M's as we know it: marriage, maternity, and mobility. And then they experience a pay gap when they have to come back at the same level or a lower level when their male colleagues have got ahead. I was really interested in a book that was recently written by Helen Tupper, and I know, Amanda, you introduced us to the Squiggly Careers, where they talk about women having to go off the workplace and then they come back and then they have to are forced to reskill and upskill. Or do something completely different. And this entire session is about the challenges that women face, and especially so in India. There was an article in 2018 where the Economist said that India is feeding its women, and they also talk about how it's a rich irony that the social standing of the family seems to be enhanced when the women of the household don't need to work. And it also goes on to say that the first thing a woman needs to do in the country is to negotiate with the family that she needs to have a job, and in all likelihood when she moves and has to live with her in-laws, they yank her out of the career. And therefore, there are these career breaks, and there are about 235 million women out of jobs at this point in time on account of this factor. But however, what's been interesting as I work with Confederation of Indian Industries, Indian Women Network, I see a lot of women being able to reskill. So they have a corporate job, then they're forced to give up their jobs. They have their parents to teenagers, and then they want to do something. They want to come back and do something for themselves. So they start a business. So very close friend of mine was a Zumba instructor, a very successful Zumba instructor, and also she trades in premium products in in food, premium premium food categories. So it's really interesting how women are able to craft their own careers in their own context, and this is really what we want to talk about. And we've got this really eclectic panel, if I may say so myself. And I will start with Amanda. And Amanda and I have been following each other's careers for a while now. Amanda was a senior leader in Shell. She took a break, which she will talk about, but she's also the mom of four and twins. And she founded an engaging community called the Career Mom, which I'm part of and I absolutely enjoy. And have sort of drawn a lot of advice from. And then Amanda went on to sort of have a really senior role in Microsoft, and today she's a senior leader in Accenture. And Amanda, you're the one who's most familiar with the concept of squiggly careers, and you've lived it yourself. So, would you like to give us some context around that?
Yes, absolutely. So thanks so much for that introduction, Asha, and it's so great to be speaking to you again since we worked together at Shell and we stayed well connected throughout. I'm very passionate in women understanding that sometimes our career journey is not just a straight vertical line up, and because it doesn't look like that, which is what a lot of men's careers might look like, if I was to generalize, women can become disheartened and perhaps feel that they're not achieving their potential. We're seeing, especially now due to the pandemic, that women, a significant number of women, are taking on increased family responsibility, and it is hurting their careers. And within the Career Mum, which is now a community of 5,500 global people who want to support and empower women to reach their potential, we discuss this quite a lot. I do find that, personally, my own journey of my career, I knew that I had to achieve as much as I possibly could. I started at Shell in my early 20s. My plan, I knew at some point I would get married and have kids. And so I wanted to achieve as much as I could before I did that. And so I got married and had kids in my early 30s, and I'd really pushed my career hard. And I recall being that young, ambitious woman, and I see them around me now in my careers. And I do think, you've got a long journey ahead of you, but just stick with it. And it's not always going to be quite as simple as that, because so many other factors and variables come into that, into the choices that you make. And it's also important for women to know that we have choices. We're not victims. And so in my 30s, with one young child, I chose to step back and what I call slow down a little bit. I did take on a big promotion actually after return from my first child, and then my father became terminally ill. And so I was forced to reassess my priorities at a time when perhaps I didn't really want to. I was still wanting to power ahead. I had my second child in my mid-30s. Then at that point, I thought I really have to slow down a little bit. The balance was too hard, so I made that choice. As I was heading into my 40s, I thought, right, now it's time to take off again. And I had twins. So I've got identical twin boys. And then again, I then knew what I was doing. I was into my flow. I was confident. I was secure in my ability. I hadn't actually taken a career break, which can hit women hard. I'd taken a year out on each of my maternity leaves, which I know also from a cultural perspective in India is, I think, quite a lot of time for maternity leave. But I knew I wanted to return and push hard on my career. So that's what I'm doing now, and that's the position I'm in. But my message to everybody is we all have to make our own choices. There's no right or wrong. It doesn't take away our ability or experience. And so imposter syndrome can start to set in. We can start to doubt our own credibility and ability. Make sure you get some sponsors, build your network, get a great mentor, and you can come back as strong as when you left.
You may want to expand a little bit on imposter syndrome. I have heard you talk at length about it, and we know that a lot of women can experience it, especially when they have to sort of deal with the double blind of the likability bias, and being competent and then seen as too assertive or aggressive. And where does imposter syndrome come? I don't think it's a very often discussed topic in India yet.
Okay, so I'm not a psychologist. I'm not an expert on this subject, and I know some people now call it imposter phenomenon. But from my personal experience, and I believe men experience this too, so we can sometimes discount it and say it's just a female issue. It's not. But at times when I've felt most vulnerable, perhaps when I've been a minority in the room because I'm a female, or others might feel it as a minority for other reasons. And sometimes you can doubt your own credibility. You can lack confidence in expressing your voice and your opinion because you might think that you're not competent, that you're not valid. Everybody else in the room is better than you. And at times of returning from maternity leave, that's where I felt it most. But again, coming back from my twins, I actually didn't feel it as much. And it's definitely the more you practice it and do it and just really start to, I document things and my successes and I reflect back on them. Something that really helped me, I got an executive coach, a lady called Amanda Davies, who some of us on this panel know. And she helped me map out my career, the kind of roller coaster journey of my career from start to current day, and the highs and the lows. And I talked her through it. And I was quite stunned at some of the things I'd achieved that I had perhaps forgotten about. So if I'm ever doubting myself, I reflect back on that and think, actually, just because in this moment, and there's no harm in actually saying, I don't know the answer to that question. That, again, does not discount that you're an experienced professional. I can't hear you, Asha.
I was muted, sorry. Um, Thank you. And I will move on to Subbalakshmi. Subbalakshmi is the gender head for the Gates Foundation. She's also been anointed as BBC's 100 Women. We work closely, CII works closely with the Gates Foundation on policy advocacy initiatives for gender specific policies. And thanks ever so much, Subbalakshmi, for joining us. What I wanted to sort of talk about is, draw your attention to Indra Nuyi's comment that, the biological clock is in direct conflict to when women want to sort of get ahead in their careers, and how women can navigate that, and what are you seeing from your own experience, as well as the data that you're seeing from the Gates Foundation and the research that you do.
Thanks so much, Asha. It's really fantastic to be here amongst you all. I think you said right at the beginning, how the three M's are disadvantaging women, and I think there is enough data, but I'd like to go a little bit deeper into some of those, the things that you said earlier on. Like one that you said that definitely it's marriage, motherhood, and mobility constraints that hold women back and prevent them from participating on an equal footing, let's say, in the economy. And a lot of my work over the last 15-20 years has also been with women from low income households, and that's where a lot of even our work at the Gates Foundation is focused. So I'm also talking about disproportionately that 90% plus women who are in informal economy, for instance, who are not at informal workspaces either. And there I think these issues also play out very differently, right? When we are talking about what does career growth look like for them? What do their aspirations mean? What does their skill upgradation even mean, right? So, but look, just zooming out and looking at the meta level, I think definitely there is data which shows that it is childcare and domestic work that is holding women back from equal economic participation. That's quite clear. It's quite clear that mothers with children below 6 years of age are the ones that are dropping out rapidly from the labor force. It's also, even in terms of perceptions of what men and women are saying, 42% women say that unpaid care work is the reason why they are out of the labor market, and that's only 6% for men. So clearly, it's one of the deciding factors in how you will advance in your career trajectory. I do want to say that there are some nuances that some of the research recently that the UN Women and ILO did. They also found that women living alone or lone parents, which are mostly women, are much more in the labor market. Now, no surprises, right? They are the single earners, they have to be in the labor market. But then there is other things happening in those families. For instance, there could be other dependents, which could be adolescent girls, which could be, other dependents that are taking over some of that care role because these women are in the labor force. And just moving beyond data, that's the reality of my life. Just reflecting on my own life, I find that I'm a single parent. I have a 5-year-old and a 70-year-old mom who's at home with me. And I do see that a lot of what I'm able to do is simply because my mom is around, and simply because, she's there as somebody who's supportive. And typically, if we find in our kinds of families, upper middle class families, etc., we can afford childcare, which is, at least in the global south, we find that a huge proportion of women as domestic workers is also something that is really helping the likes of us to come and sit in this panel discussion while they're looking after my kids. So, I feel that it's important for us to therefore look at some of the so clearly there's power relations there, and a woman's care work is always substituted by another woman, be it a parent, a mother-in-law, a sister, a care worker, or whoever. I think it's something for us to reflect on, is that even when this work is being substituted by another woman, how it's very gendered, correct? So both in paid work as well as, if you're looking at the unpaid work space. And I think that it's particularly because, as I mentioned, that, in our kinds of context, LMIC context, I live in India, I work in India, and I've worked in South Asia all my life. Here we do find that, it's really the concerns also of those caregivers who have yeah, at the end of the day, they've been at the forefront of this COVID response, inside our houses, outside of our houses, in the health system. So I'm really thinking about looking at the labor market more broadly in terms of where women are. And we also find another interesting trend that I'd like to say from, we finding from some of our research, is that even the job creation for women, or the kinds of policies that are targeted for women, are kind of going with the implicit assumption, like how can we make sure that it's flexible, it's close to the home, it's something. So while it's not stating explicitly, the implicit assumption is that, okay, do your care work, do a little bit of, so you have your own startup, have your own business, or do something which is close by, and then come back and again, take care of the house and the domestic chores. So what I'm trying to say is sometimes these social norms are also implicit in the kinds of jobs that we are, at the end of the day, both public and private sector, are creating for women. And that's something to think about, that why don't we really, and you're talking about non-linear careers, you're talking about unconventional choices in career. Why are we not thinking of livelihoods for women, and kind of relegating them constantly to these very gendered roles, both within the house as well as in the economy? So I think those were some of my early thoughts. But again, I think very important for us to reflect on how we'll change that. I think there are everybody has a role to play, right? I mean, of course, the government and regulatory authorities have a role to play, providing childcare, all kinds, and many countries have done that. Whether it's parental leave, whether it's childcare support, I mean, there's a lot that countries have done in that space. The private sector itself can really, really go a long way in creating that enabling environment, providing childcare services. Very recently, I was in a webinar and I heard about this fantastic model of mamapreneurs, which are like care enterprises for low-income household women in, I think it was Kenya, I think it was East Africa. So again, very interesting models out there, and I think the private sector can play a really important role in and taking the lead in establishing some of these norms. And finally, I think these norms have to change culturally. I think it has to be part of our education, our curriculum, our campaigns. It has to change mindsets and values and beliefs at a very core level beyond everything else. And I believe that, for me, my own career trajectory has been working with women's organizations, or, those directly working on gender equality. And so I've not had like a typical corporate career like, many of you. But what I find is that a lot of my employers, current and past, a lot of what is in the organizational culture is really what creates that enabling ecosystem for women to survive and thrive in under very adverse conditions sometimes. And I feel that if the organization works in gender equality, it thinks a lot more about it. That's also something that I've realized in the kinds of organizations that I've worked with. And I'll stop here for now.
Thanks, Subramanian. And that sort of brings you talked about the solution spacing already. And in The Economist, the same article that I referred to, this solution was meant to your mops. They hadn't really sort of factored in the fact that, we can outsource, and we are actually sort of fortunate in some senses that childcare and, domestic help are affordable and accessible for us. And ideally, what we should be doing is can sort of outsource as much as we can. Then we sort of have the opportunity to sort of dabble in a career, move forward in a career. Are we stuck? Can you still hear me? Can I just check?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, cool. So I will move on to Nick, and the reason why Nick is here is she has actually curated a very eclectic career for herself. She is a vlogger, and she's been vlogging quite honest and sort of deeply felt vlogs around menopause and the impact of menopause on women. We talk a lot about, motherhood, maternity breaks, mobility because a husband moves. We don't talk as much about the impact menopause has on women as well. We go through so many hormonal changes and how that impacts us. Recently, Nick went back to work, and she also vlogged extensively about how she felt about going back to work. In fact, Subbalakshmi says companies should be doing a lot more. Companies are actually all multinational companies, at least, have flexible working opportunities, part-time opportunities, opportunities to sort of return to work policies, for example. But also, it's really important to sort of understand what's going on inside a person's head when she's sort of taken a break from work and is trying to get back. So Nick, over to you.
Hi, thanks, Asha. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me here. So, yeah, it's been a very eclectic career. So the first 20 odd years were a very classic corporate career. And actually, it was after I had my second son that things really started to creak. And by the time I had my third child, I was really, really struggling to hold it all together. There's just no two ways, no point in wrapping it up. And I was diagnosed with quite acute postnatal depression. It was quite a difficult period. So I think, hormones can come up in lots of different ways. In actual fact, they start very young with us, don't they? We can often laugh at ourselves. I can hear myself doing it, but actually hormones aren't really that funny and can be very, very debilitating. So my first brush was with postnatal depression, and that meant that I did step off the career ladder because I needed to pause and to take a breath and to collect myself, really. And it's interesting because a number of things happened which really stopped me getting back onto the career ladder. So I had a very long career break of quite a few years, and I think the biggest thing that I found during that period, well, actually, there's more than one thing that I found. One was a real ache in terms of missing the intellectual stimulation. So it's wonderful being a mother, it's wonderful being a wife, it's wonderful being a homemaker, it's wonderful having some time to yourself and having that kind of liberation. But I think for me, the career was very much about intellectual stimulation, and also at a personal level, it's a lot of external validation. My job had defined me for a long time, and that was quite a journey to try and get over. But I also found that what I then did was just started to do things to actually keep myself intellectually stimulated. So, I kept abreast of what was happening in my world of work. And, I probably did more reading and became more informed about my industry not working than when I did work. Because when I worked, I was so busy trying to hold it all together, trying to climb the career ladder. I didn't really do the level of self-development I needed to do because I was just very, very busy delivering the day job. So I think that was something that definitely helped me. And then actually, when I felt I was in a position to really go back to work, I got hit by a really very acute menopause, and that really led to a whole series of new avenues. It took a lot of choices away because I just had to focus on balance, on my health, on managing energy levels, on trying to understand my body, trying to understand my priorities and so forth. And it also opened up a big wide world of, I think a significant lack of support and understanding about just how debilitating the menopause can be. So in a funny way, that gave me a purpose because it gave me something to share and to talk about and to try and help other women with. And what I would say is that despite having one thought I often have is, in actual fact, the career break and not having the classic vertical career, I think has been incredibly enlightening. And when I returned to the workspace, there were several great things I discovered. One of them was that you don't forget your core skills. You don't forget who you are. You get back in there. And I know we talk a lot about reskilling, and I think that it's very different for different industries. Certainly for me, my industry is management consultancy. And yes, I kept abreast on it, but actually I would say my break had probably added to my value, because it had allowed me to really invest in myself, and the old skills that, you know, hadn't been used for a few years were just as good as they ever were a few years ago. And actually being in a very supportive environment really helped me bring those to the fore. And perhaps I would offer that maybe we should all, not just women, but maybe men as well, maybe all of us should be thinking about taking more frequent career breaks, because I really think it helps our creativity and innovation. I think it widens our perspective on life, and I think we take a much, you know, I certainly found that I took a much broader, more empathetic, more creative view back into the workplace with me. The other side of that, I'm very blessed that I do have choices as to, you know, how much I do or don't want to work. And management consultancy lends itself very, very well to doing project-based work. So you don't have to buy into a full-time career all of the time. Because the other thing that I think we do need to pull into this is about choices and our freedom. So, you know, one of the things I found going back to work that I did miss enormously was a lot of the freedom I had. And I think that is a balance. And that's not just about being a woman. I think that's for everybody. And I think there is a much bigger discussion, which is around balance in our lives generally. And, you know, how much of our time and ourself is put into a working career, and how much is left for the other things that are equally important for our mental well-being, you know, for our hobbies, for our time with our families, for our time just to ourselves. And I think that applies to everybody, you know, irrespective of gender. And I do wonder whether some of the challenges that we face as women around balancing all of the different things we have to balance. You know, I'm blessed. You know, my husband and I are a team. So when I had a period where I'm back at work full time, we share. You know, we just share things in a very practical way. And I think, again, you know, organisations need to look at not just providing flexibility for the woman, but perhaps part of the equation is providing flexibility for the man, the partner, because they play a very critical role in actually enabling. We are a team, you know, so I can't do the school run every day if I'm working full time. That means my husband needs to do it too. That means his organisation, you know, needs to be supportive of that, and we are good because we are in that position. So I think gender equality isn't just about focusing on flexible working for women. It's about flexible working for everybody. It's about a balance in our lives. I'll stop there, Asha.
Thank you, Nick. And I think so important that you bring elements of purpose and elements of balance into that conversation, because otherwise it can be a very narrow conversation about just a career, making money, getting ahead, being in a rat race. And I think both Subbalakshmi as well as Vaishali have both hit the sweet spot in being able to give back to the planet and sort of have a fulfilling career as well. And Vaishali is the national chair for Confederation of Indian Industries Indian Women Network. She's a strong advocate for women's rights as well as climate change. She has a host of awards under her belt. If I start naming it, I'm not going to be able to finish the call on time. But thank you so much, Vaishali, for joining. And I just wanted to kind of hear your thoughts. I've heard you talk about how the unpaid care work is you know, the odds are stacked against the women. Women spend 300 minutes in unpaid care work, whereas men spend about 50 minutes, which also sounds like too much to me in a day. But how do you think women can overcome some of these challenges? And, you know, you could potentially also talk about what we have on offer for our members in CII.
Sure, great. First of all, thank you so much for organizing this session and in partnership with such great platforms. Well done, Asha. And it's a pleasure to be with all these fantastic women, and all the stories really resonate, you know. And when you go last, it's so much fun because you've listen to all the relevant points, and so it's also a little difficult, right? So you've all raised the right points. I think women take too much on their plate. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I think it's a function of the socioeconomic system in which we all are raised, and when all of these things come together, and when women get to work, and then when the biological clock starts ticking, I think an explosion happens unless there is a sense of sharing by your ecosystem, whether it's your spouse, whether it's your family or your organization, right? However, I do really endorse what Nick said around, paternity care and, leave associated with paternity care, and generally the responsibility associated with child care and family care, which really needs to be better distributed, both between men and women. So there's this whole thing about, men and women. Is it a biological issue, or is it also, about sexuality? We all have a balance in us, right? And so sometimes I feel we as women assert a certain part of us so much more than we should, and we deprive the men a little bit of what they could be doing willingly. And so it's extremely important for us to step back, introspect, and really have a conversation with people around us with respect to who's good at doing what. And if my spouse or partner enjoys cooking, let me not deprive my partner of that, right? If they enjoy spending time with the family, let me not deprive them of that. When I want to choose a partner, I mean, I'm talking about this in the Indian context, especially. Why should I be sort of scrutinized with respect to various checks which come into being before somebody decides to have an arranged marriage? Why can't I do the same? Anyway, that's also becoming an archaic concept. What I'm trying to say is women need to assert themselves. They'll only do it if they're brought up in a certain way. And unfortunately, we have brilliant girls who are brought up in ways which really doesn't do much to their confidence when somebody with a similar intellect comes out of high school. You see, boys are way more confident even with half the amount of academic success. And that keeps amplifying as they go onward and forward. So as, I think we really do need to look at that as families as well, and ensure that we don't have these biases as we raise our boys and girls. We also need to be cognizant of the fact that, when we have these conversations, we're also talking to men. I think that's so important because, we are all converted. We all understand. Sometimes I really do feel that, we really need to communicate with each other. And I have a lot of these conversations with men at Renew, the company I work in. And there's a huge communication gap of even understanding of what we expect. So I think that would really help in bridging the gap which exists, because at a certain level, I think that gap is getting wider and wider. But the good news is that non-linear careers are not something only women are looking at now, because it's becoming a thing. Like, we're living in a world where our children, as an, Subha, your kids are a little bit younger. I have a daughter who's working now and a kid who's going to college. They all look at non-vertical careers as a way of life, I think. So I think it's about men and women. Let's also ensure that we don't feel lonely in this journey. We step up, we discuss, we share our voice, and we become a part of various, platforms. And let me bring in a little bit of iWin, which is the Indian Women's Network. So these are enablers. So whatever we are doing, and whatever we want to do, can be enhanced if we become a part of a larger network. As Amanda said, that her mentor and sponsor made it possible for her to settle in and grow ambitiously. And let's not underestimate ourselves. Once we've gone out to work, our brain muscles, our muscles are programmed to, there is a memory which is in place. So it's very true when you go back. I took a break after my son was born. He had some issues, and I did take a break. Could my husband have taken a break? Of course. But I think at some point in our careers, we had a very frank conversation, and we really need to be honest about it. It was very clear. Whoever felt that, they got more fulfillment from a certain career and they wanted to push harder, we will have to, because we had a very global career, both of us. So we would have to switch gears. Otherwise, both of us would be backing off. So it was a very conscious, supportive decision. When I decided to go back to work full on, I got that support. So there has to be respect, there has to be communication, and there has to be honesty. And as individuals, we need to support each other. And as professionals, we need to support each other. However, some of us may just choose to be happy at home. And I think we have to respect that as well.
And I think what we need to really change is that when men choose to stay at work, we really should respect that as well. And once this changes, I can guarantee you that a lot of things will automatically change around us as well. And kudos to IWN for really mobilizing women who are pursuing careers across the spectrum, across India, pan India, very powerful centers, localized centers who are connecting with women for capacity building, for mentorship, for rewards and recognition, building a network, a very deep rooted network at a national level, at a regional level, to engage them with each other across sectors, across segments, across interests. And when that happens, it's really great. I don't know if all of you face this issue, but I often face this issue about, and I know most of us have, that after 6 happy hours, many of us felt uncomfortable joining these happy hours. And so that networking, that informal networking, I've heard women, and I can say that women definitely sort of get deprived of for reasons that they have to go back home and do some unpaid work, some of them out of choice, others not out of choice. But platforms like this definitely offer an opportunity for them to engage. I'd like to conclude by saying, let us just let men step up at home while we step up at work, if that's the choice we want to make. Over to you, Asha.
I love that because in Norway, men sort of have equal paternity leaves as women do, and so they get to sort of stay at home 2 to 3 months with the baby, and that sort of really changes, the concept of the caregiver in the household, and potentially a policy that we should look at together, Subbalakshmi, as well. Um, and I also really resonate with what you said about the network that we can provide. All of us have walked into meetings where we were the single woman, and even now we do. But what I've really enjoyed with Indian Women Network is it's my tribe. I have a bunch of women we work with. This time we put this together with the Western region, Madhavi Lal, who's chairing it, and it's been so much fun. And everybody is so efficient because we need to ruthlessly prioritize as women, right? I mean, we can only spend so many hours at work, and then we've got to get back to our family. So we're really efficient when we sort of get to work. And I did hear Sumukhi Suresh just before our conversation. She said, women, because we have something to prove, we sort of are 200% on the job. So there's more than a business case for companies as well, and everywhere to sort of have women. I would like to wrap up, but before that, we'll go around the room. And Amanda, you spoke about mentors and coaches. Um, if you were to sort of provide a 1 minute summary of what your advice would be to women who are potentially going through dilemmas around how to sort of move their careers forward, what would that be?
Well, first and foremost, ask for help. There's no shame in asking for help. So if you have some aspirations, you're not sure where to go next, ask for help. Find your tribe, perhaps networks like mine, or there's many other similar networks around. Find people who can support you. Reach out to your network that you have. So you may find that you have sponsors in your existing network, and a sponsor is somebody who it's not a formal label, but it's somebody that is helping you and guiding your career in the background because they believe in you, and it may have been a previous mentor. Ask people to mentor you, but also recognize for those women that are in the workforce, nobody makes you one day a role model. So you are a visible role model, and we all have a role to play. And I take that responsibility very seriously, and sometimes really push myself out my comfort zone to be a visible role model and to share my vulnerabilities and to talk openly like Nick does and transparently about the difficulties sometimes, which makes me feel exposed, but it makes everybody else feel really normal, and I know it helps. So be that role model and ask for help.
I resonate with what you said, Amanda, and I sort of took a lot of, I think I felt empowered by some of your sharings and Nick's sharings. And this was the first time I've heard women say, they're sort of facing dilemmas and are being vulnerable. And suddenly, we didn't have to be all that put together, because we were hearing from you guys, and that really helps a number of us. And thank you for doing what you do. Can I go to Nick next? And Nick, if you could sort of provide some advice to women on dilemmas and how they can sort of balance, the workplace, the family, the career, the hormones. What do you think your magic bullet would look like?
If only I knew that, Asha. If only I knew that. I'm still looking for it. But my thoughts are this. One is, I don't think any woman or man, for that matter, should ever devalue the role that they take on, whether that is in a classic career or whether that is being the homemaker. Everything brings value. Everything has some addition to add. And I think one of the things we need to do as a society is actually value the role of holding our families together and providing that stability much more importantly than we do, actually. I think it is a really, really critical thing. I also think it's really important for women or men to listen to our bodies and to be able to speak about that openly and not to be embarrassed to say if it is more than they are either prepared to give or are able to. I think it's okay to be completely honest. I'm obviously very honest about, how I'm feeling, what is within my realm of possibility and what isn't. It is not about a man. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Asha?
we can now.
So, yeah.
Go on.
It's it's a team. This isn't about a male or female role. This is about some choices, some honest discussions, and some choices that we make. On balance, did it hurt me to give up my career when I did? Did I find it difficult? Yes, I did find it difficult. There's no point wrapping that up. Would it have hurt me more to have stuck with the career and not taken a step back? Yes, it would. So sometimes, it is a balance. And I think finally, I think it's always about using whatever you have right here, right now. So when the children were very young, I couldn't go out to full-time work, but that didn't mean that I couldn't read, I couldn't exercise my mind, I couldn't write, I couldn't engage with things. So sometimes we just have to use what we have right here, right now, and believe that will take us somewhere. That's it. Did you lose me for a while there, Asha, or was it just intermittent?
It was just a second, and it was quite coherent. Thank you so much. And I think I completely resonate with that. I was having a conversation with an IMA club, and I was telling the boys and the girls that they need to sort of put their career on the table, and it should be a stake that the family should address, and it has to be a conversation, and vice versa, like what Vaishali said, the partners. I used to be this, when Karthik would come, Karthik is my spouse, would come and, sort of cook something in the kitchen, like fry fish or whatever. I would be like, oh, you're messing up the kitchen. But you're right. You should let them be and let them do, and make their mistakes. And I can be sort of the helicopter mom when he's trying to sort of do homework with my child. So that's another lesson, it's to have both the conversations around the career for women and men sort of truly partnering with the women. So resonate with that completely. Subbalakshmi?
So while I agree, I think a lot of it really depends on women and girls and how we train, also our boys to be more gender sensitive. I do think that a lot of the solutions also need to lie with the systems and structures that we create around. And I want to again bring back, a lot of the work that we support, for instance, is really the work of gender equality advocates who've been doing this for years. I mean, as a foundation, we've entered the gender space about 4 or 5 years ago, but there's been a vibrant community for the last 30, 40 years fighting for equal pay, fighting for childcare services, fighting for, an equal position in the economy and in public life for women. And I fundamentally believe that the most exciting part of my job is to be able to support the work of those organizations and those gender equality advocates. So I do feel that, some of those bigger questions, which are much longer term and perhaps much more difficult to crack, are equally important as it is to look at sort of, the individuals and some of the norm change within families and workplaces as well.
And we're looking forward to working with you on that, Subbalakshmi, and the insights that you have given is fantastic. Thank you so much. And Vaishali?
Right. Just want sorry, there's some background noise at my end. Yeah, so I would say that we we really do have to say stop to being a working woman, to being a homemaker, to taking care of our health. At some point, we really do need to say that we can't do it all. We have to learn to settle for about. Sorry, there's some background noise. Are you hearing it, or it's just at my end?
I think it's a back in studio. You can
Okay.
just
So
go in.
if the producers could just ask somebody to go on mute, it would be great. Thanks. So yeah, we really just need to, we can't be like super multitaskers and expect men to be, kind of unitaskers or whatever is the word you want to use. Let's, as I said, let's step back. Let's care for ourselves. Let's be a little bit, we really do need to make this world a better place and contribute to the societal value by raising a great family where we can raise fine individuals, but we have to care about ourselves. So let's not be over ambitious about what we should be doing. Let's not feel guilty about being the caretaker to a child and a parent when they're old. Let's share this, right, and share it in a way where it works best, not only for women making the compromises, but for all of us together trying to contribute in a way where women can also move ahead in a professional life if they do choose to, and if they don't, and that's perfectly fine. So I'll say that let's step back a little bit, and we can't be perfectionists. So when your husband comes in and messes up the kitchen, you should just go and appreciate the mess and say, wow, the fish is even tastier. So I mean, hopefully you'll inspire him to cook more for you. Yeah, little tricks which help.
Yeah, no, thanks. I think you're absolutely right. It's the whole context and the socio-cultural context that sort of help both the couples, right? The men and the women, and it's so important. I'd like to close out because there was a conversation around feminism in the previous call as well, session as well, where they were saying feminism, sounds like a bad word, and I heard you, Vishali, say that there should be an option for the woman to stay back and take care of her children if that's her choice. And therefore, I'd like to sort of end with, something that I read in a Brandon Sanderson book. It's a fantasy fiction. So it's a weird place to find it, but it's great. It says, what is a woman's place in this modern world? I rebel against the question, though so many of my peers ask it. The inherent bias in the inquiry seems invisible to so many of them. They consider themselves progressive because they are willing to challenge many of the assumptions of the past. They ignore the greater assumption that a place for women must be defined and set forth to begin with. Half of the population must somehow be reduced to the role arrived by a singular conversation. No matter how broad that role is, it will be by nature a reduction from the infinite variety that is womanhood. I say that there is no role for women, there is instead a role for each woman, and she must make it for herself. For some, it will be the role of scholar, for others, it will be the role of wife, for others, it will be both, for yet others, it will be neither. Do not mistake me in assuming that I value one woman's role above another. My point is not to stratify our society. We have done that far too well already. My point is to diversify our discourse. A woman's strength should not be in her role, whatever she chooses it to be, but in the power to choose that role. And it is amazing to me that I even have to make this point as I see it as a very foundation of our conversation. And therefore, just to sort of end there, this conversation is not, just one discourse. It's to kind of diversify the discourse around roles for women, and for each woman to have the power to choose her role. Thank you ever so much.
Thanks, Asha.
Thanks,
Thank
Asha.
you.
Wonderfully said. Thank you.
And I'd like to give a shout out to Madhavi, Preeti, Sheetal, Sonal, Monica, and all of the CII folk who made this happen. There's been a lot of work that went into the last 2 weeks just to push this out. So thanks ever so much, everybody, for doing this.